morning. Thank you for coming. We're all moving a little bit slower today, but it's a very exciting day. We're glad to see you come out again to the conference. Again, I'm Heidi with Super Students United for Palestinian Equal Rights. It's very long, but and it is a real privilege and an honor to have Craig and Cindi Corrie here to share the story of their daughter Rachel and all her amazing work that she did. And I think that her spirit of solidarity with the Palestinian people lives on and on and on through all of us that do that work. So I'm deeply inspired by her, as well as I feel very humbled to be able to share this space with them. And I hope that we'll give them the utmost respect, and I hope that we have a really good conversation. How it's going to go is I'm going to give a little bit of an intro, and then Cindy's going to go ahead and give us a presentation on Rachel's life and some other issues surrounding that, and then we will follow it up with a discussion, and then I will talk about how that will go once we get to that point. They're going to share with us for about 45 minutes. If Cindy wants to go a little bit over, that's fine. I'm going to keep that on track. That's totally fine. And then we will see how much time we have left over. But again, thank you for all coming. I guess what I will do, I just wanted to share a little bit. One of the reasons I would just, again, being able to share this space and talk about Rachel is a real honor for me. So many of the things that she wrote about, especially with not having been to Gaza yet and her contemplating what that meant, a lot of the issues she thought about white privilege, she thought about a lot of those really deeper issues and really struggle with those. And I find myself doing the same thing. I have not had a chance to go to Palestine yet, and I plan on doing that. And so I feel this interesting solidarity with Rachel, having never met her. And so being able to, I feel like she lives on through all of the work that everybody's doing, and it's just amazing. And so before we get started, I just wanted to share some words with you that I think are incredibly powerful, and I think it's something that Rachel had written, and I think it's really important to share that with the folks in the room. Rachel wrote, "The international media and our government are not going to tell us that we are effective, important, justified in our work, courageous, intelligent, valuable, and we have to do that for each other. And one way we can do that is by continuing our work visibly." And so I come back to that time and again, and so I think that this, what we're having here in this space and sharing that, and then sharing the story and sharing the conversation is going to go a long way towards that. And so I just want to turn it over to Cindi Corrie. Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. Thanks so much. And both Craig and I want to thank Super for organizing this event. I know we do conferences too, so we understand the demands of that. I think it's remarkable and wonderful that you're doing this. Also want to thank Callie Lund, who's not here in the room, and Heidi, because they kept communicating with me, trying to make clear what were the most important things for me to share with you today. I'm just really curious, how many of you have heard me speak before? Okay, how many have not? Okay, that's very helpful. So I always apologize to those that, because there'll be some repetition for those that have heard me before, but I think reinforcement is a good thing. So I hope I just help you to remember a little bit longer. I do want to make time with Heidi's help to share some of Rachel, what I know about her, what I learned from her. I want to share some about a few things that I've learned through this journey that I hope may be helpful to the rest of us, to everybody as we continue the work. With that, we'll get things underway. Rachel was born in Olympia, Washington, a couple hours away from here. She wrote, "I was born under the ram. I'm an Aries, a fire sign. I was born with a fire in my belly." She was a daughter and a sister. She wrote, "My name is Rachel Corrie. I was born on April 10th, 1979 in Olympia, Washington, to my mother and father, Craig and Cindi Corrie, a brother, Chris, who was about 7, a sister, Sarah, who was 2 years younger, and a really old cat named Phoebe. Rachel was my third child. And I'm going to take the liberty of reading something that she wrote in 1996 about me. She said, "I can feel my mom. I can see her silver hair fanning out from under a hat when we had snowball fights on the days they canceled school. I can see her lips trembling as she read the birthday card I made her last year. I can hear her at the end of a dock in Minnesota playing her flute for the mist and the reeds and the dragonflies sleeping on the lily pads." Rachel was a reader and a thinker. She wrote, "5 people I wish I'd met who are dead. Salvador Dali, Carl Jung, MLK, JFK, Josephine. 5 people to hang out with in eternity. Rainier M. Rilke, Jesus, E.E. Cummings, Gertrude Stein, Zelda Fitzgerald, 6, Charlie Chaplin." Rachel was a writer. "I write because in some secret compartment in my brain, this little ironclad woman keeps screaming, 'It's all you have.' Writing is brave. It is maybe the only brave thing about me." Greg and I have had the pleasure of seeing Rachel's story unfold with her words, with her writing throughout the world in the play My Name is Rachel Corrie, which was edited by the actor Alan Rickman and an editor at The Guardian, Catherine Viner. It's now in multiple languages. In Arabic, we saw it performed in Haifa, in Nazareth, and in Jaffa some years ago. And most recently, actually in the last month or so, it has been performed in Hebrew in Tel Aviv. So it has quite a life. We also have the gift of Rachel's writing, which I told Heidi not to worry about reading things that I might read, because I am so happy when I see young people and others internalizing the writing in Rachel's words. So we have Let Me Stand Alone, which was published by Norton some years ago. Rachel loved the Pacific Northwest, the woods, Perry Creek, where we live, Puget Sound, the Olympic Mountains, the Cascade Mountains, and the sea. In 2001, she wrote, "Now there are leaves on the trees, miraculously, despite the absence of rain. And at long last, the real rain comes and starts the leaves in nonsense conversation." Rachel grew and learned and explored in Olympia. She went to Olympia schools from preschool through college at Evergreen. She volunteered, starting from high school on, with the Olympia Crisis Clinic. And during college, she worked for Behavioral Health Resources, which serves people needing mental health therapy and work. And she often did the graveyard shift at a place called Hospital Diversion House. And she wrote a piece about riding the bus home in the morning after her work shift. "On the bus after graveyard shift, I walked down to the stop on State to meet it. I have my snacks from last night in a paper bag. I can feel how pale I am on the bus. I make eye contact with a cute boy in the back who looks back balefully. I become enraptured. 2 women with sculpted hair and lipstick talk across the aisle to each other about their plans for getting health. And I'm going to walk more to work on the weight problem. Behind the ladies, a black man with longish hair tells the woman next to him, 'People here don't know what poor is. They're making $70,000 a year and they think they're poor. Because money makes you spend more money. You get stuff and then you have to take care of your stuff,' the woman agrees. She's young, maybe my age. In the back of the bus, someone is talking about some band and they're trading headphones around. All these people are awake and chatty, and I'm tired from graveyard shift. I really do love them. I love us, riding the bus together. I love the transit center." Over 10 years ago, January 2003, Rachel flew to Israel. She went to the West Bank village of Beit Sahur for training with the International Solidarity Movement, and then traveled immediately to Gaza to begin work. So what drew her there? 9/11 was a turning point. She wrote, Shortly before school started, I walked with Colin to Puget Pantry to get cigarettes and a few last-minute prizes for a bingo game I was coordinating at work. It was late morning. We were having a bingo party because it was my last day as drop-ins coordinator. I convinced Colin to walk with me because Puget Pantry had the Who's Tommy pinball. I picked out various pastel gel pens in complementary color combinations while Colin tried to figure out how to plug in the pinball machine, and the man behind the counter searched for my brand of cigarettes. On the radio, the announcers were talking about giving blood. It was hard to hear. They were talking about giving a lot of blood, fast. It was the quantity of blood that made me pay attention, like something out of that Hellraiser movie. What would make the radio announcers ask the whole country for blood, a surreal amount of blood? I asked the man behind the counter what happened. I had trouble understanding what he said. 2 towers, someone bombed. Someone bombed the World Trade Center? Airplanes, he gestured with his hands. Someone crashed airplanes into the World Trade Center? He nodded at me. I asked him for matches. The people on the radio continued to talk about all that blood. Colin and I sat on the sidewalk beneath the payphone and smoked cigarettes. We thought it might be World War III. We went home and set my boombox up in the living room and listened to the radio. I was supposed to fly to Boston to see my parents the next day. I called my dad, then I walked to work. I still thought it might be World War III. Rachel worked to understand. She was taking a year-long program at Evergreen called Local Knowledge, digging into the history of Olympia and the Northwest. She wrote, I like reading about the IWW, criminal syndicalism, Woody Guthrie working for the Bonneville Power Administration. I'm glad I know about the people who lived on Elk Inlet. I'm glad I know about the internment of the Nisqually people on Fox Island. We're traditionally presented with history as a thing that happens somewhere else, certainly nothing to intervene in. Trivia. And as the U.S. turned to war as a response to 9/11, Rachel and her classmates really turned to community and to emerging peace groups. And it was all of this that led Rachel to Israel and Palestine. She wrote, my activism at this point has been extremely tied to Olympia. Trying to be local and be respectful of the local is a big part of my ethic, I guess. It was the possible consequences for Palestinians and the coming war and the coming Iraq war, and a call from Palestinians for internationals to join a nonviolent resistance that really prompted Rachel to make the trip when she did to the ISM in the West Bank for training and to Gaza. ISM is a Palestinian-led movement. It still exists. People are working with ISM in the West Bank and in Gaza. There are only 2 stipulations for being involved. One must believe in freedom for the Palestinian people based on international law, and one must agree to use only nonviolent means of resistance. And she wrote, why do I want to go? I've been organizing in Olympia for a little over a year on anti-war global justice issues. And at some point it started to feel like the work is missing a solid connection to the people who are most immediately impacted by U.S. foreign policy. I've had this underlying need to go to a place and meet people who are on the other end of the portion of my tax money that goes to fund the U.S. and other militaries. And we're going to now turn to a video of Rachel. It was 2 days before she was killed. It was the second press conference that she did in her life. She's on the top of a rooftop of a home that was eventually demolished in Gaza with other international activists, and you'll hear from them. So I'd like you to just watch this very short video. Am I in your way?
Do you want to come in?
Okay.
We are international human rights observers from the United Kingdom, from England, from Scotland, from Italy, and from the United States of America.
Who should I talk at, you or you? My name is Cindi Corrie. I'm from the United States. I'm from Olympia, Washington. That's an enormous question. I've been here for about a month and a half now, and this is definitely the most difficult situation that I've ever seen. In the time that I've been here, children have been shot and killed. On the 30th of January, the Israeli military bulldozed the 2 largest water wells, destroying over half of Rafah's water supply. Every few days, if not every day, houses are demolished here. People are economically devastated because of the closure of the borders into Egypt and the extreme control of the Gazan economy by Israel. I came to look at the aftermath of a place where 25 greenhouses had been demolished on the other side of Rafah, destroying the livelihoods of about 300 people. And that had taken place while they rounded up about 150 men, held them under a sniper tower, and shot around them to contain the men, the farmers in the area. So I feel like what I'm witnessing here is a very systematic destruction of people's ability to survive. And that is incredibly horrifying. It's incredibly horrifying. The current Israeli government, I don't have a great deal of faith that they're going to listen to any message from me. I think it has become clear that this government does not care about the safety of its own people and doesn't care at all about the lives of Palestinian people. I think it's ridiculous that my government supports this government and referred to Ariel Sharon as a man of peace. It's clear to me, being here, that Ariel Sharon is invested in perpetuating perpetuating violence. I think calling it a cycle of violence disregards the imbalance of power in this situation, that people's lives here are almost completely controlled by the Israeli government. And it's amazing that people are able to hold on to their humanity as much as they have. Sometimes it takes a while for it to set in what is happening here, because I think many of the people here, they try to maintain what they can of their lives, and I don't know, maybe it has to do with protecting their children, that they try to be happy, joke with their children. So sometimes it takes time to it's hard to hold in your mind, the complete reality of what's happening here. Sometimes I'm sitting down to dinner with people and I just realize that that there is a massive military machine surrounding them and trying to kill these people that I'm having dinner with, these families that I'm sitting down to eat with, and who are being very generous and kind to me, and their children here who are incredibly threatened, living lives that no child ever should have to live. And so I feel a lot of horror, really. I feel a lot of horror about the situation.
Tell me something that you noticed in the video.
The machinery.
The machinery, okay. A good shot of the Caterpillar D9R bulldozers. These are armored bulldozers, armored in Israel, but built by Caterpillar here. Caterpillar on their website indicates that they're able to work there. It's not real, they don't make it real easy to find, but they have a page about all they do for militaries and about how they work with militaries in order to get the equipment set up so that it can be armored in the way that you saw there. These are big machines. means they continue to be used. I read that just this week, I forget if the number was 6 or 8 bulldozers went into Gaza internally into an area where, when Greg and I were there in November, near Khan Yunis, they come into the border area. At that time, we went to the funeral of a young boy who was killed as that activity was happening there. A missile had come, something had struck him from the Israeli military. We were at the funeral thing, so it didn't stop. I think even though the home demolitions are not at the scale they were when Rachel was there, it's important for you to know that these bulldozers are still active in the region. Something else you noticed in the video? Yeah.
It seemed like there was a lot of destruction behind Rachel.
Yeah, cleared area, really. And what's important to know is that that was neighborhoods before she got there. In our trial, in civil trial, which I'll talk more about, we had, I believe it was the deputy battalion commander who was asked how far the Philadelphia route, which is the name of a very narrow route along the Egypt-Gaza border, not Israel border, Egypt-Gaza, but the Israelis by treaty had control of a very narrow route, the Philadelphia corridor. And there was a lot of conflict going on there, and they wanted to expand it. Their way of expanding it was to take out row after row of houses. And in our trial, when asked how far did the Philadelphia route extend, the deputy battalion commander who was in charge at the time said, up to the next row of houses. Testified to that under oath. Anything else that you noticed?
The wall there.
Peter saw the wall. There was a steel wall built along there. This was on Palestinian land. It was also part of expanding this Philadelphia route. And we often say that Rachel was killed to put that wall in. It was, we were there when it was still standing after Israel left internally that part of Gaza in 2005. Palestinians took that wall down. The kind of metal and everything they were using has been used for all sorts of other purposes now in Gaza. It's not the wall that you hear about, of course, in the West Bank, but this was going in as Rachel was in the area. Rachel went to Gaza, which is a very small place, I know you're aware, about 4 to 8 miles wide, about 25 miles long. The land area of Gaza is about the same as Portland. Portland is 145 square miles. The land area of Gaza, 141 square miles, but Gaza has 3 times the population. Nearly 65% of the population are under the age of 25. 65% of the population are under the age of 25. I know you've heard about the fishermen. There is 40 miles or kilometers, 40 kilometers of beautiful coastline. When Rachel was there, because of the settlements that were internally in Gaza, children where she was in Rafah had never seen the sea, couldn't get to the gorgeous Mediterranean, which to me when I am there is very therapeutic just to see it. It's polluted. That's a whole nother piece of the story that I probably don't have time to get into, but it's a beautiful place. And still, even though the circumstances change about the access to the sea, it's still, the fishermen are always faced with challenges going out to fish. And it's one of the reasons that we've had the flotillas going in and so forth. Also the farmland. There's a buffer zone on Palestinian land that the Israeli military has created around the area. When I talked about the bulldozers that were working there just this past week, that's the sort of thing that happens. Although the military is on the outside, they come in, they enter, and farmers and their families are kept from working that land. Numerous people have been killed and injured when they went out into that area. 3/4 of the population of Gaza are refugees. They live mostly in overcrowded refugee camps with very poor quality water. Water is a huge challenge, and also with limited access even now, even when things are much calmer, to electricity. And that's because the amount of fuel that they need and so forth in order to operate their electrical plants do not get into Gaza. The unemployment rate, and I get statistics from the CIA fact book, also from the Palestinian Central Bureau of Statistics. But in the last quarter of 2012, the unemployment rate was 32.2%. But the unemployment for young people, ages 15 to 29, and remember how many people are in that age group, is 48.9%, almost 50%. In that age group are unemployed. So you create a very volatile kind of situation. When Rachel was there, Gaza was occupied from within. You saw the bulldozers and so forth working. It took 25,000 Israeli soldiers to allow for the presence of 8,000 Israeli Jewish settlers who were in 21 settlements inside of Gaza, taking 40% of the land. And there were internal checkpoints, towers that were manned by soldiers. Shots would ring out from those towers. Actually, Craig, when he visited in the fall of 2003, was fired upon from one of those towers. There were constant military incursions into the neighborhood. Regularly, civilians were killed and property was destroyed. From September 2000 until 2004, until 2008, to the start of Casled, there were 3,000 Gazans who were killed, and over 600 of those were minors. So there was tremendous loss of life. And then even more, of course, happened again during Casled. And we don't hear about it very much. But even after Casled, there are still hundreds that have been killed. So the conflict continues. Rachel was in Rafah. I think you can see on the map, it's at the southern tip of the Gaza Strip. She went there because she felt it was the place where the need was greatest. It is along the Gaza-Egypt border. She lived with families and people whose homes were at risk. One was the Nasrallah family, and it's their home where she was killed, in front of their home where she was killed. She wrote, "After I wrote to you, I went incommunicado from the affinity group for about 10 hours, which I spent with a family on the front line in Hai Salam who fixed me dinner and have cable TV. The 2 front rooms of their house are unusable because gunshots have been fired through the walls. So the whole family, 3 kids and 2 parents, sleep in the parents' bedroom. I sleep on the floor next to the youngest daughter, Iman, and we all share blankets." There were 2 brothers in the house on the 2 different floors of the house. Khalid Nasrallah, accountant, on the top floor with his 2 young children and his wife, Sama. And on the lower floor, Dr. Nasrallah, who's a pharmacist, and with his 3 young kids. Part of the family, I always point out, in 2005, visited the United States. Came and traveled with Craig and me to tell their story, came to Portland. In order to do that, they had to be permitted by the Israeli government to go to Tel Aviv to get a visa to come to the United States, and they were allowed to do that. Even though the U.S. government, the Israeli government, had nothing against this family, and if you read some parts of the internet, you'll hear that they were terrorists. But neither government had anything against this family, though their house was eventually destroyed. Rachel worked in Gaza with ISM activists from all over the world. She worked with women's groups, with children's groups. Just in Olympia recently, I heard from Fida Keshta, who is from Gaza, telling the stories that she was told about Rachel playing soccer with the young kids. And we met some of those kids, and it's very heartening to see how she made her way around Rafah. She wrote at the Internet Cafe to get word out to us, because Craig and I were new to this issue. Our family was new to this issue. Our friends were new to this issue. She had a lot of educating to do, and she spent a lot of time in the Internet Cafe writing. She wrote, "I couldn't even believe that a place like this existed, but even more, can you believe there are children here? Forget the fear." They tell me that at night. Forget the fear. "I am ashamed that I am scared for my own body and dying anonymously inside a house in one of the most populous places on earth, where children die as martyrs of the occupation, which we pay for quietly without ever knowing their names. We need more people. I love all of you. Rachel. I'd like to point out that on February 15th, Rachel participated with youth in Gaza in the protest against the Iraq War. All these issues are so connected. She was passionate in her anti-war work leading up to going to Gaza, working against the Iraq War. And she wrote to me, "I went to a rally a few days ago in Han Yunis in solidarity with the people of Iraq. Many analogies were made about the continuing suffering of the Palestinian people under Israeli occupation and the upcoming occupation of Iraq by the United States. Not the war itself, but the certain aftermath of the war. If people aren't already thinking about the consequences of this war for the people of the entire region, then I hope they will start." And, I always think about how prescient she was, and there were many of us out there on the streets. But it wasn't a popular point of view in the country at the time. I told you about the demolitions, about the numbers of demolitions. Human Rights Watch wrote that between 2000 and 2004, a tenth of the population of Rafah lost their homes, 16,000 people. And Human Rights Watch wrote that the pattern of destruction strongly suggests that Israeli forces demolished homes wholesale, regardless of whether they posed a specific threat, in violation of international law. In most of the cases, Human Rights Watch found that the destruction was carried out in the absence of military necessity. On March 16, 2003, Rachel and 7 other international activists from the US and the UK were called to the High Salam area, where there were 2 bulldozers and an APC vehicle working. They worked for the entire afternoon as the bulldozers would come up to structures and threaten them and push on structures to try to prevent demolitions that day. Greg Snabel, one of Rachel's friends and an eyewitness, testified in Israeli court in our trial that bulldozers came close to him and to other ISM activists that day and stopped just short of hitting them, which led the demonstrators to believe that they were visible to the driver. There were 2 IDF soldiers in each bulldozer, one a commander to be a second set of eyes. He was elevated in the bulldozer, and then the driver. At about 5 p.m., in a run toward the Nasrallah home, Rachel was in front of the house, positioned in front of the house. One of the Caterpillar D9R bulldozers came toward her. She took a position indicating that she would not move. This time the bulldozer didn't stop. It continued over her, stopped over her, and then backed over her again while the other activists were hollering at the bulldozer personnel to stop. The Nasrallah family, who owned the home, were watching through a crack in their garden wall as the bulldozer approached, and Rachel died a short time afterward. As you all know, our family has been seeking accountability for the last 10 years. On March 19, 2003, at the Department of State, the spokesperson Richard Boucher shared that Prime Minister Sharon had promised President Bush a thorough, credible, and transparent investigation into Rachel's case, and with a report to come to the United States. We know now from FOIA documents that we've gotten that a good number of Israeli generals were involved in briefing the United States officials in Tel Aviv, and that they misrepresented what happened that day to Rachel. Misrepresenting where Rachel's body was after she was killed, even going so far as to say that the bulldozer never went over her. And in fact, the highest official to testify in the trial, Pinchas Swartz, who works for Friends of the IDF in New York City to raise funds now for the Israeli Defense Force, he testified in court that he still believes a wall or something fell on Rachel, and that's how she was killed. So the story that the generals tried to put out there very early, while it didn't correspond really with what soldiers on the ground were saying, that has continued to be part of the message that they tried to put out to the U.S. government. On May 23rd, 2003, we were told by the State Department that the military had closed their investigation, no charges would be brought, and they concluded that the soldiers did not see Rachel. Those 7 international eyewitnesses had also provided a testimony, I think 6 actually provided testimony to the military police, and emphasized that Rachel was visible, that this was a pretty flat stretch of area they were actually going over at the time, and that she was in a fluorescent jacket. On June 11th, 2004, Larry Wilkerson, who is the chief of staff to Colin Powell, wrote to our family, and he said that without equivocation, he could say that the report from the Israeli military did not meet the standards of being thorough, credible, and transparent. It remains the position of the U.S. government that a thorough, credible, and transparent investigation has not taken place. That was most recently reiterated to us by President Obama's national security staff, high officials, but most recently by Ambassador Daniel Shapiro in Israel when we met with him last year. During a confirmation process in May of 2008, the ambassador designate to Israel at the time, James Cunningham, responded to questions that came from Senator Joe Biden about Rachel's case. And he stated at the time that the U.S. has repeatedly engaged the government of Israel at the highest levels about this issue. Cunningham noted that President Bush, Secretary of State Colin Powell, Ambassador Daniel Kurtzer, Deputy Chief of Mission Richard LeBaron, Assistant Secretary William Burns, Deputy Assistant Secretary David Satterfield, among others, had raised the issue with their counterparts and other appropriate authorities in the Israeli government. But on March 14, 2008, Michelle Bernier-Toth, who was the head of Citizen Services at the time, wrote to our family, and she said this: "We have consistently requested that the government of Israel conduct a full and transparent investigation into Rachel's death. Our requests have gone unanswered or ignored." As a result of this scenario, our family was put in the position of seeing that there was no accountability, even from the U.S. And so in March of 2005, in order to maintain our ability to pursue things legally, we filed a civil tort lawsuit. We charged that the state of Israel violated Rachel's right to life and dignity. It was 5 years later in Haifa District Court that oral testimony began in 2010. It concluded a year and 4 months later on July 10th, 2011. What happens in Israeli courts is very different from how things proceed in our own courts here in the United States. There is a single judge who hears the testimony. He chooses the court dates, and those were sporadic throughout that 16-month period. There were 15 days of testimony. We heard from 23 witnesses. There are over 2,000 pages of transcript, all of which we had to have translated from Hebrew. Everything in the court, of course, is in Hebrew to English. We heard from witnesses who were on the ground that day, from international witnesses who were friends of Rachel, to many military witnesses as well. I think you're aware, many of you, that because of a special security certificate that Ehud Barak signed in this case that was very unusual, highly unusual, there were many witnesses that Craig and I and our daughter Sarah were not able to see, nor were other people in the courtroom. Our attorneys got to see the witnesses, the judge got to see the witnesses, but they testified from behind a screen. I felt that it was actually very dehumanizing to those people because I could only hear the Hebrew. I couldn't see their body language and their faces. I was really looking for, to find humanity, the humanity in these people. And instead, what I heard were words that translated to me by wonderful Jewish Israeli supporters, translating the words, but in which I detected no remorse, no remorse. All the proceedings were attended by representatives of the U.S. Embassy, There were observers from many human rights organizations, Israeli, Palestinian, Amnesty International, and Human Rights Watch. I know you're aware that on last year, August 28th, after nearly 2.5 years, that the judge, Oded Gershon, rendered his verdict. He completely exonerated the Israeli military, and he found the Israeli investigation flawless. That was his words. He said it was an act of war, that Rachel was responsible for her own killing, that the Israeli military, because it was an act of war, had no responsibility. He said it was a closed military zone, though they could not produce in court any paperwork that said it was a closed military zone. You'll hear this, closed military zone, whenever there's an incident, that people shouldn't be there because it's a closed military zone. Rachel and the activists went through Erez checkpoint, like some of you have, to get into Gaza. They were allowed in. The commander, the highest guy on the ground that day in the APC vehicle, under oath, when he was asked about whether it was a closed military zone, said he didn't think so, and he didn't think he had the authority to make it so. And so if the commander on the ground didn't know it was a closed military zone, it's hard to know how Rachel and other activists would be aware of such a thing. So this is the kind of contradiction that we have coming from this judge and with what we heard in court. I want to just share with you a few things because I do want to get a little bit to what I've learned that I hope may be of some help to you. But there was a shoot to kill order. One of the things that came out of the testimony, there's an operations log that was written, that was kept by the military, and we were able finally to see that log. After Rachel was killed, the deputy battalion commander, who was really the guy controlling things from the back that day, he wrote this: "The foreign problem is known in this region, and by way of policy, we do not stop activity due to the presence of foreigners in the area in order not to form a dangerous precedent. Those foreigners should be handled, and their entrance into the Gaza Strip should be forbidden. Additionally, the work must continue in the area of question. The firing orders must state that every adult person should be shot to kill." So there was a shoot to kill order that he explained for that area in Gaza. And I want you to keep in mind that those were neighborhoods with children in houses. Also keep in mind that within 7 weeks, James Miller, or Tom Herndal, activist from the UK, was killed within a 2-mile stretch of where Rachel was killed. That James Miller, photojournalist for HBO, filming about the home demolitions, was killed on the same border. It was very key, that he stated, or that key witnesses stated there are no civilians in war in our trial, testified under oath. A colonel who wrote the manual for how the heavy equipment should be used said repeatedly, there are no civilians in war. And the lead investigator, the person that I think we would expect, that the US government might expect, would be charged with having a fair investigation, testified under oath that he believed they were at war with everybody in Gaza, including the peace activists. Our family was struck by this lead investigator's failure to look for evidence, to secure evidence, and to resolve conflicting evidence, and to turn evidence over to the court. There's a lot more to say about the trial. Just a couple things. I think that we felt overall kind of an overriding sense of paranoia on the part of Israeli military who testified. And they often repeated justifications for using excessive force against unarmed civilians. They frequently referenced people in Gaza over and over again. You can imagine, we heard the word terrorist over and over and over again in the court. No distinction made between civilians, rarely distinctions made between civilians and armed people. We had amazing media coverage. I encourage you to go, if you're at all interested in this, to the Rachel Corrie website. Look at the top for the section on the trial. I just went down the list last night. I'm stunned myself when I go back to it at how much writing. I mean, we're really privileged in that way. And you all know that Palestinians do not get this kind of attention. Part of the reason that we're there is to bring light to all of this, and we'll continue to do that as much as we can. But if you want to read more, article after article written about it, a lot of media attention. I don't think, even with the verdict, that it was not a good day for Israel throughout the world. We had amazing support from Palestinian Israelis, from Jewish Israelis, people who stood outside the courtroom, even when they couldn't get inside because on key days when it was very crowded, not terribly large courtrooms, and they stood outside for hours just to let us know that they were there supporting us. And it's been a privilege. Craig and I and our daughter Sarah were in Israel for about 8 months. And of course, it was spread out over a couple years, but every encounter that we have, we learn from. And there's just a range of people who look at this issue in somewhat different ways sometimes, but also very much the same. I just want you to know that that support was there for us in a very big way. The case is being appealed. We have a court date before the Israeli Supreme Court on February 14th, Valentine's Day next year, 2014. I wanted to say a little bit about the U.S. government very quickly, because we all know that they haven't done enough in all these cases. And we know that our funding, and I urge you to go to the U.S. campaign website, but our funding continues to support the Israeli military, last year at the tune of $4 billion a year. Here in Portland, from 2008 to 2018, I know Peter and others have shared this information with you, but $113,224,287,000 of your taxpayer money is going through this 10-year period to fund the Israeli military. Without accountability to U.S. laws for the Arms Export Control Act, for military sales, for what happened to Rachel, what happens to civilians in this area, and to other activists overall. That money, by the way, if you go to the U.S. campaign website, you can hear about all the things that money could do instead here locally. Health care for a lot of people, green jobs training for a lot of people, and so forth. You all know about the Rachel Corrie Foundation. Our work is ongoing in a lot of ways to educate, to use art and the written word, to make connections, to support grassroots activism. I left people in Olympia at Olympia Arts Walk. The procession of the species where Rachel was a dove happened last night in Olympia. We missed it to come down here. But we were out by the mural. If any of you have not seen the Olympia Rufus Solidarity mural, make a trip up there and spend some time. Take your cell phone, because you can connect by cell phone, to hear about all the leaves created by artists throughout the world, some from Palestine, some from Israel and other places, but all the different groups that are represented there, local and beyond, about the different issues that they're working on and how all of those issues connect. They're all part of a larger picture. So we're trying to keep all the work going, and I think it's all very important. I want to share a little bit about my path during these last 10 years and some of the things that I've learned. I want to say that I treasure all the communication with groups like you and with all the individuals. When I look around the room and I see familiar faces, and I appreciate the time that I've been able to spend with you individually. And I share that because I think that's so important to the work that we all do, that every person that we talked to is potentially an ally for us. I want to just share a couple things. A couple weeks ago, I got a call from Germany from a high school student. I just happened to pick up the phone in the Rachel Corrie Foundation office. His name was Mario. He was a high school student doing a report on Rachel for a class. And I took a half hour, and I talked to him. He interviewed me on the phone. A day or so ago, I got this message back from Mario. I made the presentation and got 15 points. That's 100%. Rachel's story really touched the people. I hope some of them think in another way about this. My teacher was also very impressed and surprised about the story. I'm really thankful to you. I'm sure some of my listeners will care and follow the news about this conflict. A couple months ago, a young woman from Evergreen came up to my office and she said, my partner graduated from Evergreen. He just went to Israel on Birthright Israel. He's there now and he wants to go to the West Bank, but he's scared to do it. So I took the time, I connected him with people, and just recently had a conversation with him in our office where he came back just to try to talk about and to process what he had seen because he made it to the West Bank, up and down the West Bank. So I just want to know that there's so much power in the individual connections that we make. Never underestimate what you can do individually. Take time to learn. A wonderful friend, Kamal, with the Muslim Association in Southern California, told me in June of 2003, when I was eager to figure out what to do, he said, just take time for yourself. Just take time for yourself to learn. And I encourage all of you to do that as well. I have a hard time not working all the time, but I know we all need to take time to rest and to learn from each other. I love that we get to work with young people in our office, interns and so forth. I know sometimes, we can kind of brush up against each other, but I appreciate that. I appreciate the challenges that we create for each other, young and old, and people coming from different perspectives. So just make room for that. Be credible. We don't have room, really, for a lot of errors and mistakes. We need to get the facts. And one thing I really challenge you to do is to try to keep up to date. And I know it's hard for everybody. Don't assume because you were in the West Bank or Gaza last year that things are the same now. Even things like I hear the unemployment rate as 40% or 50%. No, it's 32.2% as of last quarter of 2012. Try to check those facts. OSHA, with the UN, there are places where you can get weekly reports or about what's happening in those areas. Find those resources. I'd be happy to share them with you. Danny, a friend of ours now, who wrote, he was a soldier in the IDF, a reservist, wrote to Rachel and really impacted her when she was there. And he said, don't exaggerate. Things are bad enough the way they are. Just tell the story as it is. Draw courage from the knowledge, though, and the experience that you have. Don't be afraid. Be visible, as Heidi read to you. Be visible. I feel that more and more. I appreciate the people wearing the keffiyehs and people I see in Olympia. Every time I see a keffiyeh, it's kind of like another enlightened person, And I think the more that we're visible, the more we make it possible for other people to join us. I want to share a few things about BDS. I think it took tremendous courage for Palestinian civil society in 2005 and tremendous organization to step up and say it's time for this now. And it's just very powerful what's happening with BDS. It was scary for some of us in the beginning. And now more and more people are stepping out. I think the more that we can pay attention to the victories, that we can communicate those to our networks, make sure people are hearing about what happened in Berkeley last week and in all the other places. And then to lend our support wherever we can, and also to believe, and I hope we'll talk about that more today, to believe that yes, in our colleges and in our communities, we can make some of the same things happen. We can keep that building going. One thing for those that feel challenged by BDS, and we get a lot of criticism about it in Olympia because of the Olympia Food Co-op. We supported the Olympia Food Co-op, and they came under a lot of challenge, but have survived the court thing that happened very, very well, and so forth. But Martin Luther King, I found this quote. He said, "We who engage in nonviolent direct action are not the creators of tension. We merely bring to the surface the hidden tension that is already alive." So anytime you sort of question what you're doing with BDS, remember that message from Martin Luther King. I'm just going to close very quickly by saying that before Rachel departed to Olympia, she wrote, "I look at this place now, and I just want to do right by it. The salmon beneath downtown, and the people who came to drop-ins group, and the creeks and the inlets and the people who were here first and my elementary school teachers and my mom. I hope that Rachel is resting in peace, knowing that she has certainly done right by me and by all of us, by leading us to Gaza. And I hope that she looks down and feels that we're honoring her with her work, with our work. Thank you very much.
Okay, trying to compose myself. I am a mother myself, so it touches my heart deeply. Sorry guys, I'm getting emotional. And I think it's okay to be emotional about it. It's a tough issue, but I can't imagine putting myself in your shoes and being in that situation and moving on and doing all the work that you have. I applaud you for it. I know you don't do it to seek the glory or anything. It's just about Rachel's story, but I think that it resonates with all of us in the room. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Ivy.
Sorry.
Okay.
So I think how we'd like to do this, I had a conversation with Craig and Cindy, and I think we want to create a nice conversation. If you have any questions, if you're not quite clear on some things, this would be a good place to ask. I think that we all, also let's have a respectful space. I know this can be a challenging and tough issue, but I think that hopefully we'll all take to heart what we shared. If you learned something new, or if this is the first time you're hearing this story, I encourage you to let it resonate and think about it. And one of the things I want you to think about while we're having this discussion is, and if you can get your hands on this book, I encourage you. She speaks so strongly to the American, the way we're so involved. We think it's so far away, but our money is going over there supporting that occupation. And she talks about it on such a personal level that it should speak to all of us, because we live here and we are responsible. If you don't speak out, then you are complicit in some way, and I think that's one of the more powerful things. And I just want to put that forward for us to be thinking about that and going forward and talking about BDS today. And so I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. So let's see what time we have. Okay, we have a little less time for discussion than I had liked. We got to start a little later, but I also wanted to give Cindy plenty of time to share, because I think I think this what happened with Rachel and the work they're doing speaks for itself. And so I think what we'll do is I'll take maybe a couple of, if you have comments or questions, I think I'll do two to three people, and then I'll turn it back over to them. We'll see how much time. I think because we're short on time, I'd like to see about 2 minutes, a minute to 2 minutes. If there's something you feel really strongly about or you really want to share, then that's fine. So I'll start taking a list, and then we'll kind of go from there. I don't know who was first, but I'll start. Go ahead.
Well, I was just wondering if you could speak to the situation within Israel, the peace movement within Israel. You see a growth of people who are disenchanted with their own government actions.
Okay. You there in the Burgundy?
I'm a faculty member here, and I used Let Me Stand last year in an activism class I teach in women's studies, and it had a profound impact on the students who read it. So I just want to thank you for making it available. And secondly, when we talked about that screen that was up in the courtroom, I'm not sure the screen was there so that you couldn't see the people who were testifying. I think it was there so they couldn't see you. Because it's almost impossible to look into the eyes of the parents to say really good one.
I have an open stack, so we can take another 1 or 2 questions or comments. Go ahead, you're next. And I can take, you raise your hand, I can write you down while someone else is talking, that's fine. So.
It's just
yeah.
an update that I heard on NPR that trees were lost also in the bulldozer incursion within the last 3 weeks. I know trees are less important than people, but it was a fact, and you said keep up with the facts. It sounded like 2 trees in my remembrance.
Yeah, go ahead.
My name's Baltazar. I just wanted to I wanted help from you, basically. I've been thinking about going to post offices on April 15th, tax day, with signs or posters to let people know how much of our tax dollars go to fund this insane war machine, this military machine. But I don't want to do it all by myself. I need other people. You know, it would help if there were 3 or 4 people at the post office. And I'm not sure exactly what kind of posters and signs. If you could, in some way, direct me to the right people. So, you know what I'm saying. It would be better if it were just more than one person besides myself doing this at my local post office, for instance. I live in Vancouver, Washington.
I can help with that.
This is what we're all doing. We're all here to share. We're all here to share.
I'd be
Yeah.
glad to talk to you too about
Okay,
some other
so
activities.
does anyone have any?
You can share.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just a comment. I just wanted to thank you so much. I'm also very moved by this and by hearing Rachel's words continuing through both of you. And I just want to thank you for your time and for your commitment. And I was very moved watching that video where I could hear her speaking and hear her words. And I was thinking just what a brave, brave soul she was to, I could feel the horror that she was experiencing and how terrifying that must be. And to just stand and just bear witness through it. What a brave, brave, courageous person, and I'm just very touched. And so just thank you so much.
So I think we'll come back to Cindy or Craig if you want to share as well, and then we can go back to the audience. Oh, didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Go ahead with the audience.
Yeah. Well, listen, I can, maybe I can respond to these and then we can have another group and Craig can comment. I'd like for you to as well. So let me say a little bit about the peace movement in Israel. I think everybody there would say it's not strong enough. There have been times in the past when it was stronger. There was a lot of activity around domestic situations. I'm sort of forgetting the timeline on that, but within the last year and a half or so. And but Palestine really didn't figure into it, which was frustrating to our peace activist friends. All of that said, I think it's just remarkable what they do. What people there tell me, what our Jewish Israeli friends tell us, is we can't do it by ourselves. And you know, we need all of you, we need what you're doing, and certainly on this funding issue and so forth, they need us to do the work. They're remarkably brave people, though. I think about Kobe Snitz, professor, Combatants for Peace. They go to Belaine, they go to the places where the demonstrations are happening. They speak out in support of BDS, which if you're in Israel right now, if you're a citizen there, subjects you to legal action if people in the settlements or somewhere feel like they're harmed, their economy is, they're somehow financially harmed by BDS. People like Dorothy Nayor, some of you probably know her name. She's, I think Dorothy must be close to 80 now or 80, but she and her husband do a lot of work on this issue. She writes, sends things all the time, one of the people who reads for me. And they're taking strong, I feel really strongly about those who are taking positions in favor of BDS. Jeff Halper, because they put themselves at particular risk. It's a different kind of risk, they would all say, than what happens to Palestinians in the West Bank and East Jerusalem and Gaza. But it's very powerful. Craig, I think you might like to share just a couple of the stories. The story about in the cafe, the guy who waited on us, and some of the messages that we got.
Well, there are a lot of them. I was thinking of somebody else that we met there. Cindy said we stayed, I think it's more like a total of 9 months in Haifa that we were here. And so we were working with our computers all that time, and either down at the bottom of the hill, if you've been in Haifa, is the big hill, And down at the bottom of the hill, we'd be in Cafe, which is a chain, but had internet access. And late one evening, right really before we got the verdict, I was talking to people there, and there was a young man who had been, you know, as almost everybody has been in the military, and he was talking about it after the verdict came out, and a couple of days later, I was back in there, and he kind of pulled me aside and said, you know, it's really important what you have done. He said the generals know there are certain countries in Europe that they can't land in, or they'll be dragged into court, but it never occurred to them that they'd be dragged into an Israeli court, and that's important. I was really thinking of a different cafe, because you go up the hill, and there's a little street, Masada Street, and for 100 yards there, that's really where people mix. So you can go down the hill in Haifa, there are a lot of Palestinians and Arab Christians, Muslims, and Jews that kind of will be at different tables in the cafes down there. But you go up to Masada, and they're at the same table and arguing, and I can sit there because the common language may be English and actually overhear people. And so it's fun. And at the Masada Cafe, it's owned by a Jew, and they will not serve anybody that's in uniform. So yeah, he can get by with it because it's Jewish, but many Palestinians work there. So in the morning, if I go in and pick up a couple of lattes, they'd know it be for my daughter Sarah, and most of the time they wouldn't allow me to pay anything for it. When we got to the verdict, the time of the verdict, our daughter Sarah started crying because we go in there and it's, I don't know, it's like you see sometimes on TV. For 10 minutes, it's a constant click of cameras. Somebody's taking our picture every second for about 10 to 15 minutes. You got movie cameras and all this stuff. Somebody filming leaned over to Cindi and said, I want you to know that there are a lot of people in this country that don't agree with your politics, but do honor, respect the way you're doing it, what you've done, how you've come in here. But we also turned around, and here's this barista back there. So a guy that just shows up from the cafe, and Sarah started crying. We came in to the cafe, that Masada Street Cafe, a couple of days later, and Cindi and I were sitting there with another friend for most of the afternoon, and this guy was waiting the tables, and I'm trying to pay him. He won't take the money again. So he goes home, and then I say, oh, okay, you know, that's fine. I had a little coffee. We have dinner, a beer or two, and he comes back with a friend, and we go to pay. Now he's no longer working. He's just sitting at a table, and I go up to pay, and he runs up and says, no, you're not going to pay the whole dinner, the beer, whatever. So we have been supported, but it's not nearly, I mean, the sport is huge to us personally. But when you start looking at the whole society, I think that there's this, particularly in the Israeli society, it's not nearly large enough number of people that work on this.
I think it's important that just, and then we'll move on, but the many Israelis are really prevented from seeing what's happening. I mean, I know people put the blinders on, but if you drive down the freeways in Israel between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem and Haifa and so forth, it's frustrating because I know what's on the other side of walls and roadways and stuff, but you don't have to see it. You do not have to see it. And it's pretty similar. I mean, I think we're the same way.
Right.
I felt that way about Katrina, or there's so many things, so many issues that we operate in our little cocoon, and we don't really have to look at what's happening there. I just want to say about a couple of other things. Other people have said about the screen, the same thing that you did, and I'm sure that was a factor, actually. Yes, there were trees, I know, and I can't think of where they were, but there was quite a lot of, there were a lot of olive trees destroyed, I think this past week I read. And I'm forgetting now the location, but that did happen.
Because they mean, the perpetrators mean it to be more than just, clearing out the landscape, you know what I mean? So that's why I mentioned it. Even in contrast with the life of human life, it would seem like I'm being petty or something, but I know to the Palestinian people, the olive tree means a lot, so that's why.
There are many, I mean, there's farmland that's raised in Gaza and in the West Bank all the time. It's part of taking the land and doing other things with it.
And
so forth.
psychological, look what we can do
That
to your
too.
olives.
Yeah, that too. I'd just like to say with your question about the post offices, I'm glad that you had help from a Vancouver person, and Peter Miller's here in the front row with the group that works here. His group is based right outside. Tell us the name of the.
Americans United for Palestinian Human Rights.
Right, Americans United for Palestinian Human Rights. I'm sure talking together, there'd be other folks interested in having signs at post offices on April 15th. The video, thank you for your comments about the power of the video. It's on YouTube, you can access it. I feel like it's important to share it because it's one of the reasons I share Rachel's words in writing, because she does a better job. I'm her mom, but she does a better job of sharing who she is and how she thought than I can do. So I was so happy when we discovered that this piece, existed.
So we're getting close to time. I think we probably go just a few minutes over. I think it's a really important conversation. So I have two last folks, because otherwise we'll go way over. And we have Ziad's incredible panel coming up next, and yes, and some other important things. So we'll have two last people, and then if you want to wrap up, and then I'll finish and have a couple of announcements, and we'll go from there. So I'll have you speak, and then Paul, you'll be last.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to list in response to your question about groups or things that happen as far as peace movements of various Israeli groups opposed, Jewish Israeli groups opposed to the occupation. They vary in terms of their politics and their activism, but just a couple if you wanted to look up would be ICAD, which is Israeli Committee Against Home Demolitions, Anarchists Against the Wall, Rabbis for Human Rights, Boycott from Within, which is a BDS organization, Breaking Silence, which is a group of former soldiers, Mahsam Watch, which is just they watch checkpoints, and a whole bunch of others, but those are just a few things.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it takes a long time to get justice. We just got up to the anniversary of the Kennedy State shootings, which was on May the 4th, and the Jackson State shooting as well. And I kind of remember back the 23rd of April 1979 on the streets of London, when Blair Peach was murdered by the London police force after being at an anti-fascist demonstration. He was killed by the police, and 34 years later, we know who killed him. We know the officers who killed him. And 34 years later, there's still no justice there. And I'm just kind of remember back to back in the early 80s when Bobby Sands was on hunger strike and died when he was on hunger strike against the British occupation of Ireland. I was with an Irish friend that night, and he said a quote from the Bible. I'm not a Christian, but there's a quote from the Bible he said, which was something like, what greater love for life hath he than he who lays down his life for his fellow man? Something like that. And I think, well, we kind of, why say, I'm so busy doing this and that. And I think really we have to fight for justice in all its forms, wherever, any injustice around the world. We have to put an extra effort into it. And I kind of think back to the people who put in so much into the civil rights movement, like Rosa Parks. It wasn't just kind of a one-night thing. She would have sit on the bus. It was years of activism before then. And so I think, we, to get justice, we really have to kind of step up what we do. Thank you for coming here. I've learned a lot about Rachel Corrie, and also just the inspiration I've got from her as well. I think we can be very inspired by younger people and older people as well. So we have to keep them fighting. Thanks for the work you do.
So if either one of you wants to wrap up.
Okay. Thank you for the list of some of the organizations in Israel, and you can find those at various websites too, but all of the groups he named, wonderful groups, and there are many, many more. And Palestinian groups that you should connect to as well.
Yes.
I've heard from people from Kent State, through the years. And again, another place where there are connections that we have. And I agree with you that justice takes a long time, and we just need to look at the Palestinians waiting for, all these many decades to know that that's true. And I think for us, I mean, it's gone far beyond Rachel. And so what we do feels really useful because it's part of something bigger. I think if all the legal was focused, if we could only look to seeing it serving our own personal interests or Rachel's personal interests, it would be harder. But because we see it as this larger thing, bringing light where there needs to be light. I'm looking forward to a film that I haven't seen here yet, but it's called The Law in These Parts. I've been hearing good things about it, and I hope that maybe we'll all get to see it and talk about it because it's about the Israeli legal system and how the legal system is really also complicit in what's going on. So you can all help to bring the light by showing the film.
Actually, a lawyer here showed it to a bunch of lawyers as part of a lawyer's training program at the downtown City Hall.
Oh, did you see it?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
What did you think?
It was very interesting. I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of thrilling to see how a legal system, as always, is in service of the norms of
The
society,
state.
the state,
Yeah.
and
Thank you for that. I just thank you all for your kind words and for being here and for the work that you do and for keeping us inspired to keep doing more. Thank you very much.
We are. It's an honor having you here. So thank you for taking time out of your schedule coming from Olympia. Wait, hold up. We're not quite done yet. Got a few announcements. So looking down on us, and I just want to share this with you. February 7th, 2003. Hi, friends and family and others. I know some of you may be surprised to hear from me, let alone from me in the Gaza Strip. So feel free to email questions. I just think it's kind of like she's talking to her family. She says she has limited access to email right now, mostly due to limited time. This is what she wants us to know. I am asking people who care about me or just have some passing interest in me to use my presence in occupied Palestine as a reason to actively search for information about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and of course, particularly about the role of the United States in perpetrating it. I am here because I recognize that as a citizen of the United States, I have some responsibility for what is happening here. I'm also here because I need to see for myself. And then she goes on to talk about some resources which you beautifully talked about. And so I just want that to be how we end it. She's telling us what we need to do. So if you're here, it's because you care. And as I've said before, and I'm going to keep talking about it, find what your passion is that's connected to this issue. Because no one else can tell you how to do that. Rachel figured it out. I'm trying to figure it out. The Corries have figured it out. And I think that's really important. And so thank you for coming. And I look forward to more conversation with all of you. So thank you.